Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. Goodbye, Mary. It's funny how I spent my whole life forming relationships, working, trying to be a good person, and building something out of nothing to feel safe, secure, and happy. It's even funnier how it all went away in a matter of few days. A few days that rocked my world, ruined all my foundations, and forced me to take steps I would never imagine to have to take. My black boots slightly sink in the mud, and I swear at myself that I chose this specific day for such an unimportant matter. Didn't the weather prediction say it will rain all night? Maybe. I haven't paid much attention to things so trivial. I fix my black coat, seeing it has lifted slightly in the corner, and feel a cold breeze wash over my bare legs. I should have worn leggings or at least tights, but I couldn't find any black ones. And surely I should not be wearing any other color to the funeral. It's hardly a funeral, though. I am the only person here, watching the freshly dug ground and the sun reflecting stone gravestone. Marianne Robinson, the grave says. Her date of birth and death are also engraved, but no other message, like others have. There are no loving daughter, or she left us too soon, or some cheesy poem quote about inevitable death and the horror of young people dying. She was only 26 years old. It definitely is too young to die. She's had her whole life ahead of her. And now, she's buried on some old, almost abandoned cemetery where no one will visit her, bring fresh flowers, or tend to her grave. Marianne was a fearful person. She was too scared to stand up to her toxic manager at work and let them bully her. She was in a relationship with a man she didn't love because being on her own terrified her. She never voiced her feelings, fought for what she believed, or chased her dreams. She was living an anxious life and never tried to change it. I sit down at the bench just a couple of steps away from the grave, and I keep looking at the stone as if it is going to speak to me, give me some words of comfort or reassurance. But nothing comes my way except the cold wind, a not very warm sun flashing my eyes. I take a deep breath and put my hands on my knees. You had it coming, I almost whisper, not wanting for my words to be stolen by the wind and scattered across the land. You very damn well had it coming, and you know it. Saying it doesn't ease my hurt. If anything, it makes me more angry. Because it is true. You should have quit it when you had a chance. It is too late now, I guess. I take another deep breath, trying to calm down my emotions. The sun hides behind the miserable clouds, and the windy breeze feels even colder now. My whole body shivers in response, and muscles tense up. A mostly cloudy and cold day is a perfect setting for funeral. Makes it easier to leave the graves behind and dive into the warmth of a car or a house, but not me. I can't leave just yet. Not until I finish what I started. Marianne lived in a belief that if she consciously stayed out of trouble and allowed people to walk all over her, she would be at peace. It worked for a while. The problems didn't seem like problems back then. She forgave everyone who hurt her, never questioned anyone's actions or motives, agreed to everything she was thrown at. It was the ultimate goal, wasn't it? Until it stopped working. The trouble came looking for her, and she couldn't keep it away, regardless of how hard she tried. That was the first time she fought back, stood her ground, and followed her beliefs. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. And now, she's stuck in this endless loop of bad decisions she can never make right. And it still hurts me to know that Marianne will never be fully free. I glance at my purse that I placed next to me on the bench and swallow hard, feeling my anxiety rise once again. It has to be done. I remind myself, hoping it will bring me some courage. It doesn't, but it was worth a try. It has been a while since that information has been dropped on me, and the steps I need to take been explained. I have had enough time to process and digest everything, yet I'm still worried. It is an incredibly serious situation, and I cannot predict how this will affect me in the future. Yet I have no choice. The worst thing has already happened. Now, I just have to keep covering my tracks to stay hidden, stay a shadow that no one can catch. And killing Marianne Robinson was the first step. I reach for my bag, take out her passport, and a small, handheld shovel. The top corner of the passport is already snipped off, as per the instructions from the government received when I registered Mary's death. The next steps seem easy to make, but yet feel the hardest. They feel final, as if killing someone is not final enough. Reluctantly, I open the passport and look at the photo. I used to look so mediocre back then, with my uneven fringe, refusal to wear any makeup, official and modest clothes. I didn't even smile for that picture. Apparently, it was the rules. I then glance at the name written next to the photo, and I take another deep breath. My passport is still valid for another 2 years. Or it would be, hadn't I cut off the corner. But it doesn't matter. I am dead. Officially, I had to die. The work I will be doing is dangerous, risky, and very important. All the ties to my previous life had to be cut, and that's why Marianne had to die. For Cassie to be born, I approach the grave and kneel on the grass. With a pounding heart, I dig a foot-deep hole into the fresh ground and gently place the passport there. After filling the hole back up, I stand up and keep staring at my grave. "Goodbye, Mary," I whisper, with a single tear rolling down my cheek. I don't wipe it. I allow it to slowly drop on the ground. The above story ends, but the suspense and thrill have never stopped. Right here is another equally interesting story. Please continue listening. In the name of the park, they say you never really know what someone is like. Not truly. Life has a funny way of showing you. Coincidences, they call them. Those little twists of fate that seem too good to be true. Like how, just as the park started filling up with the wrong kinds of people, they all began to disappear, one by one. Strange, isn't it? I've lived here for decades, in this little house with its flower boxes and its white shutters, watching the seasons change, watching the people come and go at the park across the street. For so long, the park was perfect. Flowers bloomed each spring, and the trees provided shade for the frolicking that took place under them. The good people were always there, the ones who respected it. There was Mrs. Calloway, who had walked her poodle, Franz, at the same time every morning for 20 years. There was George, the retired schoolteacher, who read his newspaper on the same bench while sipping his thermos of coffee. The mothers with their strollers, the elderly couples arm in arm, the joggers who nodded politely as they passed. These were my people. But then the bad ones came. First, it was the teenagers, those little delinquents with their cigarettes and their loud music, loitering around the swings, leaving their garbage behind. They carved their nonsense into the benches, foul words that I won't repeat, marking their territory like stray dogs. I scolded them at first, wagging my finger, telling them they should be ashamed. They only laughed. They had no respect for anything. Not for me, not for the park, not for the memories of the good people who had been there before them. But they weren't laughing for long. Then came the couple, the awful couple, who would play disc golf and argue the entire time. He was a burly man with a voice like a fairhorn, and she was a waifish thing, shrill and unrelenting like a bird. They didn't just argue, they screamed, and I even think they smoked marijuana. I would try to enjoy my walks, but their voices would pierce through the trees, ruining everything. Clem, Ollie, and Marcus, my Yorkies, would cower in fear as they approached us. It was always about money, or about some other woman, or about how she was ungrateful. And he was a brute. She used much more colorful language. The sound of their discs clattering against metal mixed with their venomous words, polluting the air. Their presence felt like a stain on what should have been a sanctuary, a place of peace. I could almost hear the park groaning under their weight. And then there were the worst ones of all. The dealers. I noticed them sneaking into the park, lurking by the back benches where the trees grew thickest. They wore hoodies, their eyes darting around as they exchanged small bags for crumpled bills. I knew exactly what was happening. I'd seen enough crime reports to recognize the signs, and to think they were doing this when there were children and teenagers in the vicinity. The neighborhood wasn't safe anymore. My park wasn't safe. I saw them whispering to people who passed by, shifting anxiously, always watching their backs. I knew their kind. I had seen the stories on the news. Violence always followed them, and the police did nothing, and yet people ignored it. They walked past, either too afraid or too indifferent to say anything. I called our local police station, and they only told me they would send an officer to check it out. I will tell you, this did not happen. As I watched from my window and saw no police officers in the area, I did report this as well. But I knew the truth. If you want something done right, you must do it yourself. I had to do something. You can never judge a book by its cover, they say. People look at me and they see an old woman, slightly hunched, dressed in my sensible sweaters and shoes, walking my 3 little dogs. They see my tidy house with the white shutters and the flower boxes, and they assume I am exactly what I appear to be. They don't see the woman who was married to a cruel man for 20 years, who learned how to endure, how to be patient, how to bide her time until the right moment came, who realized sometimes something must be lost to be gained, as was the case in preserving peace for my 3 sons. They don't see the woman who grew up on a farm, who learned early how to break a chicken's neck in one swift motion. They don't know how strong my hands really are. Desperate times call for desperate measures, don't they? The teenagers were first. It wasn't hard. One of them, a particularly mouthy one with a sneer that made my blood boil, was walking home alone one night. It was almost too easy. A single strike with the tire iron I kept in my shed, and he crumpled like a rag doll. He and his friends did not hang out at the park after that, so far as I could tell. It was strange how quickly the others took the hint. The arguing couple was next. I followed them, listening to their voices rise in fury. They were on the edge of the park, past the old fence, where no one went anymore. She was crying, and he was yelling, his voice shaking the leaves. I didn't even hesitate. A push was all it took, just one push, and his big, lumbering body toppled over the edge of the ravine. The silence was so sudden, it was almost beautiful. It was as if the park could finally exhale. She turned to me, eyes wide, lips trembling. I thought she would scream, but she didn't. She ran. And I let her, because I knew she wouldn't tell. Women like her know better than to cross women like me. And maybe she will use this second chance to make some better life choices. The dealers were harder. They moved in groups, cautious, always looking over their shoulders. But people like them, they get greedy. They trust the wrong people. One by one, they fell. Each disappearance, a small victory. The police didn't even look into it too hard. Junkies, they called them. No big loss. I made sure they disappeared quietly. A little patience, a little careful planning. No one questioned it. You wouldn't suspect I could even be capable of these deeds. The park is quiet now. The good people have returned, along with the lilac blooms and the koi fish in the pond. Mrs. Calloway walks Franz without fear. George reads his paper in peace. The mothers push their strollers without looking over their shoulders. Their babies have grown and play freely on the park equipment without having to read rubbish. Soon, a new batch of these little lambs will be springing about. The joggers smile again. It's so nice that the park has cleaned up, they say. Feels safe again. Isn't it amazing that all those rough types just stopped coming here? I wonder what happened, Mrs. Calloway mentioned yesterday, as we paused to dispose of our dog droppings before exiting the park. I smile back, but then, just as we step onto the sidewalk, I notice something. A new teenager sitting on the swings, head down, hoodie pulled tight, just sitting, watching. I grip the leash in my hands, my knuckles whitening, because it is safe, and I intend to keep it that way. Let's continue with the next, no less thrilling stories. I didn't mean to do it. I didn't mean to do it. The words echoed in my mind as I stood there in the dark, my hands shaking, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the sound of the storm outside. The wind howled through the trees, and the rain hammered against the windows. It was a night that felt like it was made for horrors. But the real terror, my terror, was already inside. I stared down at his body, lying in a pool of crimson that seemed to stretch out, devouring everything it touched. His once bright eyes, filled with laughter and warmth, were now dull and empty. His chest was still the rhythmic rise and fall I had come to know so well, now forever silenced. It wasn't supposed to end like this. We weren't supposed to be here. I never meant for any of it to happen. The night had started out differently. We were celebrating. Well, I thought we were. It had been a long week for both of us. John had been working late at the office, and I'd been buried in a dozen little tasks at home. We barely saw each other, only passing like two ships in the night. So, when he suggested dinner out, I'd jumped at the chance to spend some quality time together. We went to that little Italian restaurant we loved, the one tucked away in the corner of the city, with the flickering candles and soft music. Everything felt just right. The kind of evening that reminded me of why we had fallen in love in the first place. However, as the night wore on, something changed. Something was off. Something I couldn't explain. It started when John leaned in and rested his hand on mine across the table. He smiled, but there was something in his eyes I couldn't figure out. Was it uncertainty? Maybe it was just me. I hadn't been sleeping well at all. We had building tension between us for months. First, it was little things that were simple to overlook, but now they were impossible to ignore. "What's on your mind?" I asked, trying to smile back. John sighed and leaned back in his chair, looking down at his plate for a moment before meeting my gaze again. "It's nothing, really. Just work stuff. You know how it is." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed him. I never did. When John didn't want to talk about something, he wouldn't. But then, as we left the restaurant, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. I couldn't help but smile, hoping that maybe he was attempting to rekindle the spark we'd once had. He'd always been good at that, surprising me and keeping the romance alive in his own way. "What's this?" I asked, teasing him as I took the box from his hand. "Just a little something," he said, his voice sounding odd. I opened it, and inside was a ring. But it wasn't a shiny, sparkly diamond ring that you'd expect as a romantic gesture. This ring was old and looked like perhaps it had been passed down through generations. The ring was tarnished, and the stone had a crack in it. "It's beautiful," I said, though I wasn't sure what I meant by that. There was something that didn't sit right in my gut. "Do you like it?" he asked. I nodded, but found it difficult to smile genuinely. I felt chills all over. "Where did you get this?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. Something felt wrong. John didn't answer right away. His eyes had shifted, almost like he was hiding something. He looked away before attempting to look at me again. "It's been in the family for years. It's special. I thought you would like it." "Special," I echoed. My fingers traced the ring's surface, and it was cold, even colder than metal typically is. I could feel the tension between us. It wasn't just about the ring. It was deeper than that. Something had been building for a long time. John as acting odd, avoiding my eyes, trembling as he reached for the car keys. But we didn't say anything more on the drive home. It was quiet, other than the rain that had started. Everything was blurred by the water running down the windshield. The wipers were thankfully filling our silence. When we arrived home, we went through our routine of getting ready for bed. John took a long shower while I tried to relax in the living room. But my mind wouldn't shut off. I kept thinking about the ring, about the way it felt in my hands, and John's strange behavior. When John finally came out of the shower, he walked past me without saying a word, heading toward the bedroom. "John, wait," I said, my voice shaking. "Is something going on? Something you're not telling me?" He stood at the bedroom door and turned to me. He stared for a moment, with just a blank expression. Then he sighed and walked toward me. He sat down on the couch next to me. "I've been thinking a lot," he began with a low voice. "About us. About everything." My heart thudded loudly as I waited for him to continue. "I think we're drifting, Sarah," he said, his words immediately taking my breath away. "I just don't know if we can fix this anymore. We've been drifting for months. It felt like the world was tilting." I couldn't breathe. "Drifting?" I whispered. "What do you mean? We're fine. We're busy. We're just busy, that's all. We can fix this and make it work." John shook his head. "I'm not sure anymore. We've both been pretending. We're just not the same people we were when we got married, Sarah. I'm tired. Really tired. I don't think I can keep pretending." I wanted to cry, to scream, but I couldn't. All I could to do was sit there, trying to figure out what he meant. None of it made sense. I'd been trying so hard to hold everything together, and now it felt like it was slipping through my grasp. Before I could say anything, he stood up and went to the bedroom. I heard the rustle of sheets and the soft thud of him getting into bed. I didn't know what to do or say. I sat there for a long time, what felt like hours. The silence was killing me. Finally, I was unable to stand the distance between us any longer, so I went to the bedroom and stood in the doorway. John was lying on his side, with his back facing me. I couldn't see his face, but I felt the coldness coming from him. "John," I whispered. He didn't respond. "I can't lose you," I said, my voice cracking. "Please don't give up. We can work through this. I'll do anything." Still, there was no answer. Something inside me snapped. I was frustrated and scared of losing him. I didn't know what came over me, but I crossed the bedroom, grabbed the ring from the nightstand, and chucked it across the room. The silence was broken by the ring hitting the wall. Do you really think this is going to fix everything? I shouted. This stupid ring? A symbol of what? The lies we've been telling each other? Finally, John turned to face me, his eyes wide. Was he angry? Scared? But before he could say anything, I saw it, something sharp and dangerous, glinting in his hand. He had a knife. I didn't see the motion coming. 1 minute, I was standing there, shouting at him. And the next, I felt the cold metal press into my side. It wasn't deep, but it stopped me in my tracks, clutching my wound. "John," I whispered, my voice trembling with disbelief. "What are you?" But he didn't answer. He didn't move. I was frozen, trying to understand what had just happened. My breath came in shallow gasps. In a panic, I grabbed at the knife, trying to push it away. I stumbled back, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what happened. Then, in a blur of motion, I grabbed the nearest thing I could get, a heavy glass vase, and swung it at him. It hit him in the face, and he staggered backward, the knife slipping from his hand. But it wasn't enough to stop him. He lunged toward me, and I fought back with everything I had. My mind was full of fear, confusion, and anger. I didn't know what I was doing anymore, or how it happened. All I knew was I needed to protect myself. The next thing I knew, John was on the floor. His body was crumpled, his unblinking wide eyes staring up at me. His chest no longer rose and fell. I didn't mean to do it, and the next story will be told right away. Please listen carefully. The Man in the Lake. Since I was a child, I've feared him deeply, though I've never laid eyes upon his elusive person. I can remember vividly walking along the narrow trail that surrounded Lake Victory during the Ides of October. The water, dormant and as reflective as glass, was enraged by the fiery reds of the perishing leaves that clung desperately to the maples surrounding it. If you glanced from a distance, you'd think it was a pit of lava, scorching through the center of the earth, from the leaves that already pirouetted to the ground. A magnificent blanket of gold and orange stretched invitingly along at your feet. Consequently, as the trees became more barren, the seasonal breeze squeezed between the branches, knocking together their nimble limbs. With its powerful grasp, the whooshing breath of Mother Nature would envelop all sounds within an ear's distance of man. This type of silence was cathartic. If you closed your eyes, you could become coalesced with its gentle movement, as a spider web would become accessorized against the unbeknownst skin. The random assortment of sounds stemming from birds, the splashing of fish, an acorn falling from the tree, the ominous sounds of swaying, narrow trees like a rusted seesaw, or the mercurial patter of rain echoing against the wilted leaves, producing a light bass that was rhythmically harmonious to the ear. My grandfather always mentioned this man was always present, but you had to search persistently without fear or a cluttered mind. There was always talk of a dock, though the far side of the lake was unrecognizable from the conception, with its bends and curves to and from sight. He always said, not many find this man in Lake Victory, that it takes a special kind of person to gain his trust. The man was full of wisdom, distinguished, and had the ultimate answer to life's enigmas, he claimed. That he had experienced the greatest challenges man can face. I used to circle this lake frequently as a child, climbing trees for a better view, skipping rocks to alert him of my presence, and whatever other racket I could concoct to make myself evident as far as I could muster the courage to. Of course, this came to no avail. In my mind, the imagery of this man had always changed. Some days, he would be terrifyingly tall, his limbs slender, and his eyes were always hidden underneath a low-positioned straw hat. Other days, he would have a becoming face, accentuated by a tinge of red from physical exertion. I pictured him growing corn in small patches, picking berries from wild bushes, and fishing regularly from his forsaken dock. A fire would be ablaze during his nights, where he would sit complacently, listening to the crickets and the sounds of night. As I went through high school and college, the distraction and monotony of life had guided me far away from Lake Victory, in search of material things, to chase a dream enriched by hollow rapacity. My family's vacation home had become a distant memory. I no longer needed to acquaint this man during the fall, because he no longer could fill the void inside of my heart as he would in my youth. Or so I thought. I figured that new quest, with all the goals I had set for myself to accomplish, would provide far more solace than the man in the lake. I riddled myself with distraction, so much so I was afraid to be alone with my own thoughts, praying my responsibilities and egocentric monsters that loomed behind would never catch up to my incessant steps and thoughts. However, when things that provide no internal peace reach an expulsion point, there comes the burnout. It wasn't until I was 37 that for the first time in my life, I began to feel the weight of time bearing down upon my slouched and exhausted shoulders. It was quite amazing when I returned, how the lake had never lost its luster. However, it is also true that not many know of this lake's whereabouts. Furthermore, it would be bizarre to even encounter another bystander in your journeys around its trail. It wasn't long before I started to realize that the wonderful colors that encapsulate nature never truly lose its vigor. Only the mud-made things in life itself begin to fade as your optimism and naivety of being young dissipates as you embrace the harsh realities of existence. The future remembers history in black and white, though those who lived it always can revisit the palette that painted their peaks, whether the ravishing color of their wives' eyes when they first met, the color of their first vehicle sitting, sparkling in the driveway, or his father's blue flannel shirt, always rolled up to the elbow as he returned home from work. I remember spotting the rays of the sun streaming through the naked branches, placing my hand within its warm consultation like I did as a child. My pallid flesh began to glow as an orb would, the light bending around and through my stretched fingers as I tried to ball it up and capture it within my selfish fist. The trees, though still gallant and strong, were showing signs of age then. Their bark had become brittle and fissured. The base of some of these trees had become cavernous, offering safe haven for the smaller critters. I reflected on my own appearance, with the subtle lines beginning to formulate below and beside the eyes, the random sprouts of gray hair poking through my sideburns, and the pouch of flesh that had grown dormant around my waist. I, too, was succumbing to life's greatest guarantee, and I reflected upon my mortality as I rested my hand against the withering bark in passing. The man in the lake must be growing old. It was then that again I was enlivened by the man himself as I began to intake the fresh air. Surely in my adulthood I could find this man, who must be very old himself, and not as evasive as he was many, many years before. Those creaks and snapping of branches under the light prancing of the deer would set my heart ablaze, gawking maniacally and frozen still, hoping to finally catch a glimpse of this folklore. The ground was still forgiving to my steps, still fecund from the week's rain, and my soles glided effortlessly across the discarded tapestry of leaves as they did when I was young. And through certain partitions between the blinding trees, you could catch a swooping heron, the elongated neck, saintly patience, and aloof demeanor, awaiting the perfect moment to spear its beak into unsuspecting prey, just as they had in early summers. I remember the trail was as underutilized as ever at 37, stumbling atop exposed roots and stubbing my toe against jagged rock. I had been swimming through the thickets, gently whipped by the returning force, though I continued to push further than I'd ever had as a child. It wasn't long then before that allure and optimism that guided my clairvoyance towards the man in the lake previously was becoming shrouded by the enclosing nature surrounding my steps. Briefly, I remembered pausing within a small pocket of land, like an atrium within the center of the forest, and weighed my options going forward. I concluded that maybe my grandfather made up this man in the lake, that maybe I knew this all along and held on to this anecdote like one holds on to an old shirt from his past, attached to the memories it harnessed. It was then I turned towards the trail where I had come from. Then I craned my neck towards the hazardous continuance just ahead. Something within was battling, opposing forces destined for different destinies, though I allowed my city-wrought mind to win the battle once again. I turned back towards my vehicle, leaving the man behind once again. Now, I am 79. I've raised children, paid off my mortgage, made all the money one can make to live a satisfied life. However, something was gnawing in the confines of my mind. The man in the lake. Here I was again. The trail was non-existent now, but I allowed what was left of my memory to guide me towards my former footsteps upon weakened limbs. Some of the trees now had fallen, and Lake Victory was as exposed as it ever had been, as I gingerly stepped around the detriments of my journey. In brief increments, the past would flash before my eyes, and through my childhood eyes, I was allotted the opportunity to see Lake Victory in all of its former glory. My breathing was heavy, my hands calloused as I tightly grasped my walking stick. My calves were aching tremendously, though my heart thumped with the excitement and fervency of a teen. I knew this was my last opportunity. The fall always seemed to leave me speechless. How could it be? Something that I've witnessed dozens of times still enraged my love for this very earth, just as it had the first time. It was the essence of beauty, natural, pure in all of its forms, and I was appreciative that it only climaxed for a few weeks. Things of such enchantment are usually ephemeral, undeserving of the burden of obsolescence. The woman you meet in a foreign land, gone before you awake in the morning. The feeling on a motorcycle, with your hair in the wind, barely avoiding death, and the war cry that follows, with your heart nearly shattering your rib cage. It was superior to all, because it was effortless. It was the cycle of life itself. The atrium was still present, though it had shrunken to barely enough room for an elderly man such as myself. This time, I trudged through the webbing of branches and shrubbery, my face becoming sliced, and my hands bloodied by their sharp teeth. I could see the sun breaking through, about 20 feet ahead. This must have been where the man lived. I broke through the remaining brush, out into an open field. The purple and yellow flowers arched from their nesting spots, swallowed by the remaining green of October that survived by a water source. I looked upwards, glad to see the sun, receptive to its blanketing of my worn flesh. Then I looked towards the water once again, and there it was, the aforementioned dock. However, I was now forlorn, spotting no cabin in the woods, nor anywhere that a man could survive in such circumstances. I did not see his corn, nor his burn pit, where he spent his nights. I've spent my whole life in retrospect, always comparing myself to the man in the lake, his humble attitude, his love for nature, his ability to acquire happiness without material things. His lore kept me grounded to reality. And now I was faced with the harsh truth that his existence was never crafted by veracity. Nor was this apotheosis one in which I dreamed many times before. I harped upon why my grandfather would speak so greatly of him, as if a friend. Why allow me to go on these wild goose chases, hoping to encounter some begrimed being, steeped in desolation? I approached the dock apprehensively, acknowledging its worn and derelict bones, the way it slouched towards the right side, and how the algae grew rampantly across its damp surface. I took a careful step and stopped, now hearing the lapping water gently clapping against the embankment, taking along with it the atrophied leaves, as a Viking would be sent off during his death. I took another step, stopping once again, surprised by the stability with a poke of my stick, and then decided upon shuffling towards the very edge. Here I stood, looking out over the lake that had held such a prized position within my heart. I looked down towards the surface of my hands, with all of the wrinkles and liver spots that come regretfully with age. Then I looked around the lake, witnessing its vitality once again. I understood that though some of the trees would tumble, that this very dock itself will eventually surrender to entropy, that the man in the lake may have been a farce, that ultimately I was eternally grateful for everything it had provided me in my life. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, feeling the brisk air searching through my lungs. As I exhaled greatly, there was a surge of enlightenment that had imbued a deep revelation just as I had opened my eyes. And it was at this moment I knew I had found the man in the lake. As I looked down, just ahead of the last portion of the dock, I saw my reflection within the still water, the white hair that whisked away with the gentlest of breezes, the thick, clouded glasses that stretched across my eyes, my hunched disposition barely holding up underneath my trembling legs. This fascinating search for a character that had lived deep within all of our souls, one stripped bare of the repressed angst and uncertainty that haunted us all outside of this mystical place, with all of its simplicity and understanding of life that one tends to convolute upon their odyssey towards enlightenment. This was the ultimate lesson, and it took a lifetime to understand. I was the man in the lake, just as my grandpa had once been, and maybe one day you will be too. Just when you think all the weird stuff has been told, the next story will make you think again. The mannequin in the lake. Johnny and Sally didn't believe me when I told them the mannequin in the water had saved me from drowning. Well, something had pulled me down, and I suspected it had been her, but I didn't mention that part to my friends. Instead, I pointed to the exact spot where I believed she'd pulled me up from the rough Lake Michigan water. They laughed out loud. It's true. Her arms swayed forward and back. I swear. I motioned with my arms the same way the mannequin had done so. The marshmallow that was supposed to be for my s'more slipped out of my fingers. Sand covered my piece. For God's sake, I'd been looking forward to making them with my buddy and his girl. Sally guffawed. You're so stupid, you know that? Plus, if you would have gotten more practice in class, you wouldn't have almost drowned. Maybe I shouldn't be here with your stupid asses, I said, glowering at Johnny, who'd had the bright idea of skipping school. Just because he'd said, but I knew why. Because of her. Johnny had skipped school so many times that the teachers probably didn't even care to find out where he was. Me, though, this was only my second time. The first time was just a few days ago, the day the mannequin had saved me. I hurled the marshmallow into the water and watched as it floated away. But when the tip of a mannequin's fingers sprang out of the water and took my piece in, a shiver ran down from the top of my head to the end of my toes. Did you guys see that? Bro! Here. Johnny split his s'more in half, the gooey center stretching like fresh, out of the deep fryer mozzarella sticks. My buddy Johnny and I had been friends for 4 years now. Since first grade, my only friend. All the other kids sided with him always, but when I tried talking to them, they'd ignore me. Yes, I longed for more friends, and yes, I felt a little jealous of Johnny's charisma. But I knew I was lucky to have Johnny in my life. My only friend. I helped him with his schoolwork, and he got me out of trouble. Always took the blame, no matter what shenanigans we got into. And this time was no exception. He had a fake doctor's note ready for us, and if the teachers and parents found out it was fake, he'd say he'd planned it all. Sally, though, we'd just met her this year in 5th grade. The moment I laid eyes on her, my heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. Little hearts formed around her head, just like in the cartoons. But just as quick as I'd fallen for her, she took a liking to Johnny, and they hit it off. And she often rolled her eyes at me. At the end of the pier that was yards and yards away, water splashed. I squinted to get a good look. Figured something had been thrown into the water and washed ashore, for it was usually like that. Guests came to the lake, swam, held parties. Music blasted at full volume, and instead of taking care of the lake that provided them with the best Saturday and Sunday parties and cookouts, they littered the water and the sand. Even the junkies left Their pills and needles scattered their poison, which became a scavenger hunt for the other junkies and beach cleanup crew. I took a few steps away from Johnny and Sally, then turned to tell them I'd be back, that I wanted to see what was at the pier. But Johnny and Sally began to make out. They kissed, as fake as the telenovela actors my mother watched every evening from 6 to 9. And she ignored me those 3 hours. In fact, I was on my own most of the time, whether she was home or not. She either worked, watched TV, or locked herself in her bedroom. When I arrived at the pier, I made my way under the boardwalk. The clouds that had gathered darkened the underpier, but I could still make out the figures that stood still. It was like they'd met for a secret meeting, and I'd just discovered them. "Hi," my voice said, struggling to get that one word out. Not one of them minded me, but I could hear their whispers. I inched closer. Their whispers stopped. At the end of the underpier, where the water and sand met, there she was, my mannequin, my savior. I went to her, avoiding the still figures. But as I neared them, a harsh gust of wind pushed me down to the sand, close to them. "Push," I heard them whisper. "Water," they continued. My breathing increased at the thought of these lifeless models somehow communicating. I looked up at them. The figures had their heads turned to me. How? I had no clue. They had no eyes, no mouths. In fact, there was nothing on them but the head, arms, legs, and torso that made them up. Naked, motionless. And though they weren't looking at me directly, their gaze was fixed on me. I pushed myself up and walked backward, away from them, away to the light past the underpier. But before my body touched the light, one of them blocked me. It was her. I knew it. There was a connection between us. I turned to her. The arm that had stopped me remained up in the air. "Bring," they said. And I turned to them. No realizing when, she pushed me, and again, I was down. Sand kicked in my face. No idea which of them had done it, because when I looked up, they remained still. Now, they were closer. How many were they? 9, perhaps. 10, if you counted her behind me. Where was Johnny? Sally? Still making out? Friend? Forever. Us? Never leave. They had a cultish demeanor about them. When they spoke, it was chant-like, but like they were speaking to me. "Water?" she said behind me. "Lake." "What? You want me to go into the water?" "Us. Forever." Friend. Were they recruiting me? "I can't," I cried. The sand that covered my hand scratched my eyes. "My mom, she'll get worried. My friends, they'll come looking for me soon. She hate," one of them whispered. "Who? My mom? Sally?" "He lost," another one said. Johnny. Had I lost my friend to her? We friends. The one behind me tugged at my shirt, her hand already pointed at the water. I turned to my friends. For a moment, it looked like Johnny had noticed me and locked eyes with me. Then, Sally turned his face away to hers. Whether she hated me or disliked me, what was true was that she didn't consider me her friend. She was all about Johnny. I turned to the mannequins under the pier. There were 8 now, plus she, who had saved me, still behind me. The one missing was now in the lake, its torso above the water, its arms extended, ready to receive me. Friends forever, I whispered. The above story has ended. Let's listen to the next story. Late for rest. This story centers around death. I'm late, she thought, as she ran for the bus. Her friends would say that was her life's motto. Amelia scrambled on the bus, trying not to jostle anyone. She had been given a final warning about not getting to work on time and knew her boss was serious. She was good at her job, but this city had over 2 million people. She could be replaced. In fact, she was one of many autopsy technicians who were employed at her job. She enjoyed working with her colleagues and liked working under her supervisor. The problem was, on top of being a natural procrastinator, she was in school full-time while working full-time. But this was her last semester. Her goal was to become an ME. She had always been interested in true crime as a kid and spent her free time watching the ID channel. Her first interest was in forensic science because she wanted to investigate crime scenes. But death and dead bodies never bothered her. And she started working in the morgue as an undergrad, which spurred her interest in forensic pathology. It was then that she learned she was gifted in reading corpses. All those years of hearing about petechiae, cyanosis, and lividity became useful. She could read bodies like a book. That, combined with her proclivity for stockpiling information about diseases and murder, made her a veritable glossary of forensic pathology. Amelia was well liked at work because she was knowledgeable and friendly. Plus, she had a great work ethic while at work. It was outside of work that she struggled with procrastination. She just struggled to stay focused. If she had an assignment to do that required research, she'd end up going down rabbit holes on a side topic that caught her eye. She would know it's time to stop. But if a deadline wasn't impending, she knew she could get away with pushing something off in favor of exploring her current interest. This habit is what created such a wealth of knowledge for her. Unfortunately, it also made her have to do everything last minute or even late. Since becoming an adult and responsible for her own finances, she has never filed her taxes on time. 2 years in a row, she forgot altogether. To compensate, Amelia didn't get much sleep and often slept through her alarms. It was probably her body and brain's way to ensure she got enough sleep. Her boss didn't care how good of a worker she was if she continuously showed up late. She understood that, yet she still struggled to alter her habits. On top of that, she couldn't stay late because of her grad research. She had a thesis to finish and defend. Amelia lived in a state of guilt and shame over not being better at time management, but figured she'd have time to learn how to get better at it later. Today, it was important to not be late. There was still a possibility of making it on time. She missed her first bus, but ran full speed 6 blocks to catch a different one. She had a chance to rest before her stop, and then she'd have to sprint again for the light rail. It was a tight plan, requiring more physical exertion than she was used to, especially outside in Houston in the summer. But it was better to turn up drenched in sweat than late. For once, Amelia made it to work on time, and surprisingly, she wasn't sweating or even tired. Smiling to herself, she walked into the lab, expecting a few comments razzing her for unusual timeliness. However, everyone looked stern. This wasn't unusual in a morgue where many unfortunate events cause bodies to end up here. It was especially hard when it was a child or a victim of a violent assault. Or worse, a child who was a victim of a violent assault. Occasionally, a friend or relative of one of her colleagues came through. Everyone was very professional, but an underlying awkwardness was always present. Amelia approached the body they were centered around. She looked down at herself. Shock doesn't begin to describe what she felt. Confusion, of course, was also a dominant reaction. Was this a prank? The level of cruelty involved in doing something like this as a prank was beyond her comprehension. "What the fuck?" she yelled. For once, she was not late. And this is how they treat her. No one turned to look at her or even responded. "How the fuck did you do this?" Doubt started to flood in. She grew up in the foster system. Did she have a sister she didn't know about? Did she have a twin? "Who is this?" she yelled as her frustration and fear grew. Still, no one met her eye or replied. "When did she arrive?" her colleague Nate asked. "Half an hour ago," Mike, her supervisor, replied. For once, she was early. "What the actual fuck, guys? You are going too far," she screamed. She liked these people. How could they be so cruel? Was this supposed to be some kind of lesson for her extreme tardiness? Like an extreme example of what could happen if she continued living her life, always running late. Ironically, I believe she was hit by a bus while she was running for a different one, Mike suggested. "Wow, death by bus," Angela quipped. "This is sick. It's not funny." "Who is this?" she cried. Mike stepped back right into her, literally into her. It was slowly dawning on Amelia that this wasn't a prank. She looked down at the corpse that was obviously hers. She was dead. She was hit by a bus. It was unfathomable, but she still had a lot to do. I don't think there is a need for an autopsy, Mike announced. Slowly, everyone turned away, and Amelia took the chance to step closer to her body. "Wait!" she exclaimed. No one listened. Amelia remembered her last moments. She had gotten in an argument with a man near the bus stop. His attempt at catcalling was graphic and disturbing, and she told him, "Shut the fuck up, creep." He retorted with a comment suggesting she needed to be raped. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" Amelia demanded. "You're an uptight bitch who needs a good dicking down whether you want one or not," he replied. "I don't have time for this," she mumbled to herself while looking around for help. She saw a cop car across the street and started to head that way. She had to pause because a bus was rapidly approaching her stop. The last thing she remembers is being pushed. "This was not an accident," she yelled at her colleagues. Desperation set in as she realized this would be recorded as an accident instead of the murder it was. Legally, it was probably manslaughter, but when you're the one killed, you feel murdered, not manslaughtered. Her colleagues continued to go about their business as Mike filled out the paperwork. "Please, look again, Mike," she said as she peered over his shoulder. She watched him type the details, or her death, which she found the most surreal event of the day. "Please," she whispered again, before going to look at her body for evidence that she had been pushed. She needed someone to turn herself over. She even reached out herself. But in her non-corporeal state, there was nothing she could do. She cried tearlessly as she lost hope. "I feel we should do something more for Amelia," Angela said. "Like plan her funeral?" Mike suggested. She had no family. "I was thinking more along the lines of an autopsy," she offered. "Amelia would have wanted one." It's true. Even if she hadn't suspected an attack, she still would want an autopsy. She had already planned for her body to be donated to the body farm when she died. She had lived a life of science and wanted to continue in death. "You're right," Mike said. Before getting up, he changed the paperwork to justify an autopsy. Amelia waited as patiently as she could until it happened. Her body was finally rolled over, and there were marks indicating that she wasn't just pushed, but punched in the back with 2 fists. "Holy shit," Angela remarked. Stunned, the whole team began discussing possibilities as Amelia felt herself being pulled away. "No, I don't want to go," she cried. This would be the final rabbit hole she'd ever go down, and the most important one to her. She fought against this invisible force, tugging her away, because her interest was piqued. She had to know that they solved this crime. The cops needed to know to look at security cameras so they could find this guy. She physically felt like she was in a game of tug of war. with her soul being the middle of the rope. Finally, one last tug pulled her away. There's at least one place she could not be late for. The next story will begin now. Shadow, hounds, endless void out the window. You can hardly tell whether there is some kind of space whizzing past, or trees, or the gullet of some fantastically huge animal. Being able to see the stars helps, but the roof of the car keeps getting in the way. The landscape keeps shifting from open to covered. You think you remember Mom saying you would be driving through some forest soon. You can't sleep. Days in the car, and everything is stiff and sore. A few more hours, they say, like they mean it. I mean, you knew it would be a long trip. Cross country is a long way to go. But staring out a small window at passing scenery that largely doesn't change from state to state is mind-numbingly boring. A flicker in the corner of your eye, but you know better than to turn your head. You might be tired, 3/4 asleep, but you know you aren't seeing things. Your heart speeds up. Your breaths quicken. You strain your peripheral vision to get a better idea of what is running alongside the car. Again, always at night, especially in the darkest places. A nightmare of sleek muscles, open, panting jaws, and long legs ending in what looks like razor-sharp claws, all ebony black, invisible if you looked at it dead on. No discerning features in the blackness. Nothing you could pinpoint to show someone else the demon dogs running next to the car. And yes, dogs. Sometimes it was just one. And how you know it's the same one all the time, you'll never be able to tell. Other times, there are several. Considering their color and tendency to sort of bleed or ooze over each other, it's impossible to tell exactly how many there are at times. They run constantly beside the car, seeming to brush up against it at times. They don't make any noise. You can't tell if they are physical things, though the fact no one else sees them and they disappear in any light says something. Their slavering jaws drip, though it doesn't smear on the glass, nor does their breath fog the windows. They just are. Nothing about them really screams menace, despite how they look. They don't pay attention to the occupants of the car much, don't seem to notice when you try to avoid their eyes. They run, eyes forward, coursing into the night with you. Suddenly, you see one dart off the road into the darker shadows under the trees. The others gather closer to the car, seeming to close ranks and become more alert as they run. You strain your eyes in the darkness, trying to pierce the void of the deepest shadows. What would they be running after? Some kind of prey? Some kind of threat? And a threat to whom? You or them? You slow your breathing as much as you can. Try to tune out the hush of the tires and the air conditioner. You try not to think about smothering your mother for that little snore cough she's doing. She really can't help it. It's just covering up. Was that a noise? A crunch scream in the distance? Damn it, there are too many smaller noises around, covering anything up. You start to pant and sweat, worried about what you did or didn't hear. You keep glancing at the rest of the pack, trying to read their body language. Is that a snarl? Is that one staring off into the woods or ahead of the car? Are they moving closer, more carefully, or picking up speed again and relaxing? An interminable amount of time later, the other shadow hound suddenly bounds out of the blackness ahead, turning sharply to take up his place in the pack again. Whoa. You scan him, looking for any sign of what happened. Then you laugh at yourself, because how can you tell if a shadow is bleeding or hurt? You relax and start to drift off, finally lulled by the swaying of the car and the shushing of the tires. Your eyes close and you sleep. Weightlessness, briefly, then pain as you slam into the seats in front of you. Breathlessness as your body adjusts from being asleep to awake so abruptly. You scramble upright, or as upright as you can get, trying to get your bearings. The car is twisted around, now facing the woods across from where you were traveling. You can see skid marks, and the front of the car is all banged up, like you hit something. But there's nothing in the road, nothing in front of the vehicle. You check on your parents. They're fine, but look like they got knocked out during the crash. They are both bleeding a bit, but nothing seems serious. You try to gently wake them, but don't want to accidentally hurt them. You look around for your phone, remembering you need to call for help. As soon as your fingers touch it on the floorboard, you feel a growl in your chest. Then you hear the deep grumbling from outside the car. Snapping upright, you look frantically around in front of the car, looking for whatever made that malicious sound. You see nothing until you catch a flicker in the corner of your eye. With dread, you make yourself focus on your peripheral vision, scared to see what is making the sound. It's big. You can almost catch glimpses of scales as it moves, gliding around the light. This one, whatever it is, does seem to have mass. You can see the trees shifting and swaying, like there is a breeze blowing through them. But only as it passes. The others are still as stone. You check quickly around and don't see any of the shadow hounds. Were they scouting for this thing, leading it to you somehow? Did this thing kill them all? Or did they run when it attacked your car? Because you're fairly certain this is what caused the collision. Impossible to tell. You couldn't even tell whether they acknowledged your presence or not on the road, other than as an object to race, a sound, a whistle that turns into a high-pitched giggle, a howl and shriek, all in one. It repeats around the little clearing, growing louder and more melodic, until it stops. Suddenly, you see the hounds lunging and leaping. Trying to keep track of the movement is impossible. You can only catch tiny fragments of glimpses from the corners of your eyes, but you can hear the yips and snarls, the sound of impact from the tussle. Eventually, there is a deeper, pain-filled snarl that rends the air, then crashing and banging through the trees as the high-pitched howl shriek begins again. This time, sounding triumphant, you sit there, breathing slowly as you strain to listen. A huff at the window, a brush of almost fur against that side of the car. You slide your eyes that way to see as much as you can out of the corner. The biggest hound, the one you consider the leader of the pack, stares back at you and slowly blinks. He nods, and you nod back, grateful for the protection. Your parents start to stir and moan, and you remember your phone. You look down to dial 911 and glance back around you as you start to talk to the operator. You can see the pack out there, taking up a defensive perimeter. You sigh and relax, knowing you are safe from any more dangerous shadows. The Alpha stands to the side, taking up an outer perimeter watch. He looks back at the car, knowing that soon it will be time to bond with his mage. She's almost ready. The attack tonight was proof of that. But she is strong. She did not panic, did not scream. She trusted them. He knows they will have a strong bond. He grins fiercely, showing all of his teeth. Yes, they will work nicely together. It's only the beginning of trouble. As I sit on the uncomfortable train seat, blankly staring out of the window, I feel the heat wash over me in an instant. Breath 1, breath 2, breath 3. It's okay. I can do this. Trying to stay calm and relaxed, I look away from the window, starting to feel dizzy from the speed we pass the trees with. You've done this before, I say to myself as a pep talk. Just because it's different setting doesn't mean you can't do it. There is only one problem. If it goes south, I won't be able to escape for another 3 hours of that train ride. I have to execute the plan perfectly to the last step to make sure I will get away with it. In moments like this, I swear at myself for choosing to do that specific line of work. I'm still a beginner. I am still nervous and anxious about the jobs, even though my mentor tries to convince me it will get easier and more natural. I let out a huff and smile at that thought. What a messed up world it is to get used to doing something so awful. I personally don't have a choice. I need to do this and clear the society from disgusting and horrible people. My eyes travel down to my backpack, trembling slightly from the train movements. filled with the tools I will need for this specific job. The top zip is open, and the sun faintly glints in body of the syringe I brought, the tool for Plan A. If all goes well, I won't have to travel too far down the alphabet to finish the job. But I prepared myself for many possibilities and outcomes. I push my head back onto the headrest and close my eyes, breathing in the dusty smell of the carriage. A quiet conversation of the couple 2 rows ahead of me reaches my ears, and I focus on their words to calm my nerves. It's hard to tell what the topic of their exchange is. All I can make out from it are words like secret, promise, disaster, and truth. The nosy part of me wants to move closer and listen in, but the rational part of me rejects the idea, bringing my focus back to my assignment. I should not distract myself with anything until the job is done and I can get off the train. My phone buzzes in my pocket, and I take it out to see my mentor's name on the screen. Yes, I answer quietly, looking around for any other passengers that could be in the earshot. What's the update? His low and raspy voice sounds in my ear, and a shiver travels down my spine. I will approach the target in 8 minutes, I reply, and saying it out loud must activate some more anxiety in me, because my leg starts bouncing and fingers start fidgeting with the seam of my jeans. Keep me in the loop, he says, and hangs up. I take one last deep breath and stand up, grabbing my backpack and closing the zip. Here we go. Slowly, I make my way towards the front carriage. The first class one I don't have a ticket for. You have to be confident when walking past, but not too confident. It brings attention. Easy. I enter the carriage and quickly scan the faces I can see for my target. I notice him at the table the furthest away from me, so deeply interested in whatever he is typing on the laptop that I can sense it will be easy to execute my plan A. He has got gray hair with some black streaks still running through. The suit he is wearing looks expensive, perfectly tailored to his broad shoulders, but slim figure. He has got a clean shave, but the eyebrows he is furrowing are thick and badly unshaped. Luckily, he looks exactly like the picture I was given. The fact that he has a laptop on the table and a drink next to it is a slight inconvenience. I wouldn't want to damage his laptop in the first part of the process, as he may not be as forgiving for me to move to the second stage of the plan. My movements have to be even more careful now. I cannot afford to make a mistake here. I shuffle my backpack and tilt it to the right side, which is where the tables are. As I slowly make my way towards the end of the carriage, I intensely calculate the angle I have to use to not cause too much trouble. My target's laptop is by the window side of the table, as is he, still furiously typing on the keyboard. His wine glass is placed to his right, almost at the edge of the table, which means my best move is to knock it away from him and his laptop. I swallow hard, take another deep breath, and head to the door that lead to the next carriage. As I am about to open it, I turn to my right and push his glass off the table. Oh my goodness, I am so incredibly sorry, sir, I say nervously, trying to keep my voice slightly higher pitched than my natural one, and I take some tissues out of the side pocket of my backpack. He swears and closes his laptop. How the hell can you be so clumsy? He's angry. I can hear it in his voice. It must have been a nice glass of wine. But then he looks at me, the low cleavage of my blouse, the long and wavy brown hair barely covering anything, and he smiles. The frustration from his face is gone. Sir, please, I will buy you a new drink, I promise. I mumble, still pretending to be stressed over this situation. Ah, darling, please don't worry. It's just a liquid. When I'm done wiping off the seat opposite him, I throw the tissues in the bin and head for the bar, leaving my backpack innocently on the seat by the window. As I walk away, I make sure to swing my hips with the movement to attract more of his attention. With the wine replacement in my hand, I walk back to the table and smile innocently at my target. He smiles back at me, probably thinking he got lucky I came across him. I know what he does when no one is looking, to what atrocities he lowers himself when he is not pretending to be a highly respected businessman. And I also know that my silly outfit and clumsiness made him incredibly happy. Wipe this smile off your face, you monster. You have no idea what's coming. I sit on the bench I just wiped off and push my backpack under the table, right by my legs. My name is Cassie, I say, and gently bat my eyelashes at him. I hope I didn't spill any wine on your gorgeous suit or very expensive-looking laptop. I chuckle nervously, waiting for his reaction. Well, Cassie, I think you just got lucky. Nothing seems to be damaged. I look at the table behind the laptop. Actually, there may be a little left here. Please, let me... I lean to my backpack under the pretense to get the tissues, and with them, I take out the syringe and place it on my lap. After wiping the invisible stain off the table, I smile at my target again. Thank you for being so understanding. Of course. Before he says anything else, I stab his thigh with my unassuming weapon, and his eyes open wide. What did you just do? Shh, I say in my normal voice, and watch him slowly drift away. Have a nap, sir. The above story ends, but never stops. Here is another story that will not disappoint you. The Yellow Truck. Man, $6 for an ice cream sandwich? Highway robbery. Jack squinted at the menu, slapped crookedly on the side of the bright yellow panel truck. Perry's ice cream. Everyone had a restaurant on wheels these days. Knockoffs of famous characters grinned back at him with their dead eyes. He knew the actual products would be a deformed, melted version of the picture, and he found the irregular eyeballs and melting smiles to be unsettling. A nice, plain ice cream sandwich would hit the spot. "Excuse me. Hello." Though the sliding sales window was open, Jack saw no sign of a vendor, even though the speakers puked out a chiptune version of La Cucaracha at top volume. "Are you going to take my money or what?" The chill from the freezers seeped out from the window. Jack leaned in a little further, noting the container of ice cream sandwiches that could be easily opened from his vantage point. He looked as far into the truck as he could see, then checked over his shoulder to see if he had an audience. The neighbors could be so nosy. With no one in sight, Jack quickly snaked his hand into the window, opened the container, and grabbed hold of a coveted ice cream sandwich. "Should have been doing your job, ice cream man," he mumbled as he walked back to his house, mouth full of ice cream and perfectly soggy cookie. He casually tossed the wrapper into his neighbor Mrs. Crowley's yard. Mrs. Crowley was the sort of woman everyone assumed was a witch, and the local kids would egg her house each Halloween and dare each other to ring her doorbell and run. She was probably a very nice lady, but Jack didn't care enough to do anything about it. The yellow truck sat on the street outside Jack's house for hours, rotating through its jaunty but very limited playlist, which, Jack noted, recycled La Cucaracha far more than was probably necessary. Jack considered calling the police, but with his record and at least one warrant out for his arrest, he didn't want to call any attention to himself. Still, he was surprised that no one else in the neighborhood seemed to have called. In fact, no one else in the neighborhood even seemed to pay the truck any mind. The sky eventually darkened, and the street lights buzzed on. And finally, the truck shut off its pixelated musical loop and trundled away. As night settled in, Jack, not wanting to lose the sweet and ill-begotten taste of ice cream from his lips, didn't bother to brush his teeth before crawling into bed. His leg was missing. Jack searched around the house, tossing couch cushions and overturning tables, flinging plates and mugs from his kitchen cabinets, even checking behind the toilet just in case. But no leg. He licked his lips, tasting the smooth vanilla cream from his earlier treat. Jack's brain fought to make a connection between the ice cream sandwich and his missing leg, but the thoughts were foggy and nebulous. The opening notes of La Cucaracha floated into the room. Jack launched upward, sweat pouring from his face as he shook off the nightmare. He tasted the residue of the ice cream on his lips, then flung the clammy sheets off his body to make sure his leg was, in fact, still there. La Cucaracha played in the distance, just audible through his open window. At first, Jack was able to dismiss the music as a memory echo from earlier. But the music grew louder. He lurched out of bed and towards the window, stopping to wrap his robe around himself so the neighbors wouldn't get a peek at his genitals if they happened to be awake, and also looking directly at his house. The familiar yellow panel truck was slowly turning onto his street, music playing at a volume just loud enough for him to hear clearly, but still retain a dreamlike quality. Jack had the strangest feeling. The headlights were aimed directly at him as the truck crept towards his house, an inching pace that was almost sinister. It was far too dark to see if a driver was present this time, but Jack assumed there was one. Jack shut the window, muting the noise just a touch, and tried to get back to sleep. The song slithered into his ears and brain, worming around and preventing him from falling back to sleep. He promised himself that he would give the driver a stern talking to in the morning if the truck were still parked outside his house. As the sun started to peak over the horizon, the music finally died down, and Jack stood in the window, watching the panel truck slowly crawl down the street. He hadn't bothered to grab his robe this time, but the fog of sleeplessness had settled over his brain. More than 1 cup of bitter, black coffee was necessary to get him ready for the ride to work. Slower reactions would make the commute more dangerous, he thought, snapping on his bike helmet. He cursed his revoked driver's license, unsteadily mounted the bike, and started pedaling. At each red light, Jack took a generous swig out of his travel mug, and by the time he sat down at his desk, he was wired. The sheer amount of coffee he drank that morning had agitated Jack's stomach, so he was looking forward to having solid food by the time noon rolled around. A little something to absorb all that coffee. He walked to his favorite sandwich shop, a tiny hole in the wall, a block or so down from his office. It was a checkered tablecloth affair, plus an easily accessible tip jar and an oblivious cashier, so he almost always broke even. The welcome bell chimed merrily as Jack opened the door, but the chimes didn't stop when the door closed. He paused, listening, then realized the notes formed a song. La cucaracha increased in volume, steadily, and Jack was too busy frowning at the noise to notice when the hostess greeted him. Sorry. Table for one, he told her, and she walked him to a booth by the window. Jack started to sit, but realized he could see the bright yellow panel truck pull awkwardly into the parallel parking spot directly in front of the diner. He sprang back, an odd fear clawing at his chest. Maybe a different table, he said. The hostess shrugged and pointed him to a table near the kitchen. Jack slumped down in a chair that still let him see out the window. The menu, still as maddeningly crooked as before, was fully visible from this vantage point, and Jack noted that though the sales window was open, No one was manning the counter. So Jack couldn't shake the feeling of being watched as he ordered his lunch, chewed, drank, wiped his mouth with his flimsy paper napkin, paid at the counter, helped himself to the tip jar, and walked out the door. Every move soundtracked by the tinny tunes pumping out of the truck's speaker. No one had approached the counter to buy an ice cream the entire lunch hour. His muscles relaxed as he walked back to his building. The more the music faded with distance, the better he felt. He hadn't even noticed he was so tense. Jack rolled his neck around, rotated his shoulders, and was just about to reach the automatic doors to his office when he heard it again. The 8-bit notes of La Cucaracha increased in volume behind him, and he swung around, fists raised and heart beating rapidly. His boss, who had been walking up immediately behind him, backed up. "Whoa! Whoa! Jack!" Treating Jack like a panicked horse had, presumably, his boss's desired effect. And Jack put his fists down. "What's got you all spooked? Bad sandwich?" His boss chuckled and then breezed past Jack into the office. Still on the sidewalk, Jack caught a flash of yellow down the block. He didn't wait to see the truck this time and rushed inside. Jack was waiting, rather impatiently, to cross the street on his way home when a shiver ran up his spine. He looked over his shoulder, and his stomach seized. The yellow ice cream truck was also in line at the stoplight, just 3 car lengths away. It wasn't playing the music, but Jack thought he could hear it all the same. Jack wasn't completely sure that the truck was following him, specifically as he cycled through the neighborhood, but with each turn, he became more and more convinced. The truck kept a slow speed and stayed a modest distance behind his bike, far lower than the posted speed limit. He stopped at the cluster mailbox at the top of his street, mostly to check the mail, but also to see if the ice cream truck would keep driving. The truck slowed to a halt a few yards from the mailboxes, the staccato sounds still aggressively worming its way into Jack's brain. Jack fiddled with the mailbox key and took an unnecessary amount of time inspecting each piece of mail, even the junk. But the ice cream truck still didn't move, and Jack stared directly at the driver's side of the windshield. It was so tinted that he was still unable to tell if anyone was in the driver's seat at all. He flipped the bird, just in case, and got back on his bike. As he started pedaling the short distance to his house, the truck started following again, a few houses down from his own. Jack heard the truck accelerate. His heart thumping, he quickly looked back to confirm that, yes, the ice cream truck was speeding up and heading his way. He checked his surroundings for a safe place to duck behind, but only Mrs. Crowley's rose bushes offered any sort of protection. He darted towards the bushes, abandoning his bike and hurling himself into the roses in one semi-graceful movement that would have made a movie stuntman proud. The thorns bit into his skin, and one scratched dangerously close to his left eye. The truck had missed him, but Jack heard the screech of brakes. Jack painfully extricated himself from the rose bushes, and the ice cream truck still idled in the road. La cucaracha, blaring incessantly. The back door of the truck swung open with a creak. "Hey!" Jack yelled, wiping blood from his face, only to realize he also had blood on his hands and lots of other places because of the thorns. He lurched towards the back of the truck, his left leg dragging slightly. It would be bruised in the morning, he thought. "Hey, I'm talking to you, asshole!" Jack rounded the back of the truck and leaned on the open door. No one was inside. Through a narrow break in the curtains, Mrs. Crowley observed Jack as he yelled at the ice cream truck. He had always been an odd duck, that Jack. Terribly messy. And just the other day, he had been standing at his window in the middle of the night with only a robe on. She had almost seen his genitals. Mrs. Crowley couldn't make out exactly what Jack was yelling, but she imagined it was full of swearing. He started to lean into the open back of the truck, and then, in an instant, he was yanked inside. Before his legs made it all the way across the bumper, the doors of the truck slammed shut with such force that Jack's left leg was severed at the knee. The bloody leftovers dropped unceremoniously to the pavement and rolled to the curb. High-pitched notes of La Cucaracha distorted with static, and the truck shuddered violently. Mrs. Crowley took a tiny sip of her tea and watched the menu sign spin as the truck convulsed. With one last tremble, the truck stilled and the spinning sign stopped. The music had changed, and so had the sign's content. "Perry's Hamburgers," it read. Still crooked, the truck slowly crept down the street, and she pinched her curtains shut. "Thank you for being here to listen with me. Let's enjoy the new story together." The black of 3 a.m. My favorite time of the day is 3 a.m. Why, you might ask? Well, the answer is quite simple, but the answer is quite complicated. You'll understand in time. All we have is time, especially at 3 a.m. 3 a.m. is for the people, a heaven and a hell that works hand in hand. Most are sleeping by 3 a.m., the normal practice. That's not the true 3 a.m., though, not in the slightest. 3 a.m. is uneasy breathing as you wake from a nightmare, alert and ready for danger, before you realize it cannot cross the plains into reality. It existed, but the silence that 3 a.m. offers you reminds you it is no longer real. It was real, but it's gone. Maybe it'll be back, but not now. Not at 3 a.m. However, for some, it's far too real, far too close, and it's right there. 3 a.m. is there to support them, though, the black filled with cartouche from the moon. It makes the lights we use seem so bright. makes every step seem too loud. Yet, it is perfect. 3 a.m. is technology-lit rooms. It's for the gamer who has yet to quit their endeavors, with softly pressed keys and hushed voices. It's for those who the 3 a.m. favors, letting the time wash by as they hope for sleep, reprieve, something. It rarely comes. They hate the 3 a.m. 3 a.m. is for bright white lights of shops that seem amiss in the black of night. The people inside always vary, but not all of them want to be there. Not all of them like that side of 3 a.m. It's filled with soft chatter, or more often, no chatter. A silence that booms, that ticks on by. The people all have reasons for being there. Some can't sleep as a duty to their family, to travel within the black of night, to lessen their family's load. Some can't sleep because of what sleeping means for them, the horror it brings along again and again. Then there are those that brave the 3 a.m. for something go insignificant as money. The cashier who experiences the full blunt of how slow 3 a.m. can be. The man with a gun, he's the most desperate, but he knows how bad the 3 a.m. can get. The officers, tired, exhausted, but they have a job to do. 3 a.m. is terrifying. It's black, black, black. It's lonely. It's scary. There are things that happen at 3 a.m. in back alleys and bar bathrooms. 3 a.m. teaches you just how horrible the world is, how unmerciful it is. I think 3 a.m. depends on the people. It's made for the people. 3 a.m. is the time where no one judges, where people can be their truest selves, for best or for worse. 3 a.m. is like the sky, the night sky. It's black, black, black. That is it. It's darkness and darkness, and it swallows up everything. 3 a.m. is like the sky, bright and full of stars, all so far away. The sky is darkness, 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 but it allows us to see, to truly see what surrounds us. It shows us the stars from so far away, burning and burning away, until you realize that we can only see what the stars once were, a bright light before it burns out. 3 a.m. is for loss, for quiet sobs and silent wailing. It's for time to stop, to let reality hit you head on. 3 a.m. is for selfish, hateful crying over losses you never used to think you had to prepare for. 3 a.m. is for pain, for bubbly and outgoing people to let their feelings take control, to lose the mask they present the world. It's a time for red to meet bathroom tiles. It's a time for young people to fly. It's time for pain. 3 a.m. is pain, and it doesn't know anything else. 3 a.m. is for love, for heart-to-heart chats on top of bridges, or whispered phone calls under blankets. 3 a.m. is for wrapping wounds you shouldn't have made, but knowing they will worry your friend, so hiding them is a priority. 3 a.m. is for promises. A text that says you'll love them forever. A voice message saying it's not their fault, never their fault. Sometimes it's promising them unconditional love, and sometimes it's promising them more time. 3 a.m. is mysterious like that, despite its flaws. I love 3 a.m. I recognize it for what it is. It's a time to rest, to scream, to cry, to mourn. But it's also a time to talk, to connect, to know you aren't alone. 3 a.m. is peaceful. 3 a.m. is awful. It gives, but then it takes. 3 a.m. is where I met you for the first time. On the very bridge I wouldn't leave, I met you. We spoke of 3 a.m. together under the moonlight. We spoke of 3 p.m. as well. 3 p.m. caused your 3 a.m. After all, 3 p.m. was something that took a long time to come for you. But once it was there, you would savor it, even if only for a moment. You spent your days wishing for 3 p.m. Because if 3 a.m. was for life to pass, 3 p.m. was for school to pass. Then you spoke of such unfairnesses that were never righted once 3 p.m. came for you. The aftermath of 3 p.m. We both knew that 3 a.m. was your only reprieve of the day. And yet you decided that 3 a.m. was worth dealing with what surrounded 3 p.m. It wasn't my first 3 a.m., but it was yours. So we talked and talked and talked. I managed to stop your plans. Each night you came, and each night I stopped you. Each night I could stop you. Your 3 p.m. never got any better. I knew that. I knew that. I knew that. Your 3 a.m.s got so regular. We got so regular. Then we got better. Or did we? Was I just imagining that? I saw you smile more. Soft and so vulnerable. You gave me your soul, whispered every secret. And yet, you were my sister, my little baby sister. Not by blood, not by name, but by 3 a.m. whispers. You were blood in ways that mattered. Shared blood-splattering pavements and matching bruises from after our 3 p.m. You were my 3 a.m. You made my 3 p.m. bearable, and I returned the favor as much as I could. Little sister, you were so little. We were far too young. I broke our promise. First. It was selfish, foolish, And absolutely monstrous of me, you weren't there. You didn't need our 3 a.m. I slipped. I'm sorry. So sorry. I knew there would be consequences. When you came to our spot on the abandoned bridge, the next 3 a.m., oh, I tried to hug you, tight, as you wailed, pulling you into a cold embrace. It was no use, though, no matter how tight I held you, no matter how much I loved you. I failed you, my dear little sister. You were the only person to find my body, and I, yours. So today's story has come to an end. Or perhaps it never really ended. There are mysteries still there, questions still unanswered, and sometimes things that seem to only exist in stories can creep into reality in unexpected ways. Are you sure that when you turn off the sound, everything around you will still be normal as before? Or is there something watching you? Either way, always remember that these are just stories, or at least we want to believe that they are. If you like moments of suspense, tension, and breathlessness, don't forget to follow me so you don't miss the next stories. And next time, when you come back, make sure you are ready, because what awaits you may be even scarier than you thought. See you again if you still have the courage to continue listening.